May peace be upon you, fellow Earthlings, glad you're here. We have now arrived at the final and most important part of our Mesopotamia series. I hope to come back to this fascinating part of our history for specific legends or histories someday, inshallah, but for now we have covered all the important basics and can venture into the depths of the Mesopotamian belief system, tackling the big questions: who created us, how, what other creatures exist, what happens after we die, and what did they consider a sin or a good deed. This video will be the first in our new playlist, Virtues vs Sins, where I hope to look at those same big questions across different belief systems. Most of us know quite a few things about the main deities in different cultures, but what do we know about their concept of good and bad? Like, can you tell me what used to be a sin in ancient Rome? Well, subscribe and inshallah we'll get to that soon enough. I realized that I haven't told you guys yet how I plan to do this whole series. To be honest, I hadn't completely figured it out myself, but now I'm ready to share. Inshallah, I will try to cover as many interesting civilizations and belief systems as possible since the beginning of human history. I hope to proceed in a chronological order so we can make sense of their evolution. If I miss any or you simply have an advice on some cool ones we should check out, let me know in the comments. Mesopotamians were pretty much the first known civilization, but before them we had animism, shamanic practices, and even some early human species that I hope to cover later on. Those won't be in the chronological order. For each of those cultures, I hope to make a final video diving deep into their belief and religion. But to avoid spending too much time on explaining every little thing and to share some fun facts that aren't directly related to our big questions, I'll do a few episodes beforehand covering all that background info. So in this video, for example, when I talk about a ziggurat, you should already know what it is from the previous episodes. In case you don't, a ziggurat is a type of temple in Mesopotamia that looks like this. Okay, we've talked enough, now let's get into this final big video on Mesopotamian beliefs. I hope you'll learn a ton of cool stuff just like I did. How did the inhabitants of Mesopotamia see the world? What did you have to do to be a good person in their eyes? This so-called cradle of civilization, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, changed the course of human history by innovating astronomy, law, writing, and even impacting the 21st century meme culture. Now, isn't that some accomplishment? Okay, let's start with the tradition and listen to some Sumerian and Akkadian language in order to get into the mood.
Wabi ipad, eden lagas she ingen, sa shugal bishu, sa khardo takabi, eden na kibani us.
Turturbina shukam, galgalbina gigudakam, orangishmatore kikake, punama, ipisam shaniam, pasang mahuri, abapim lagapitum valasu, abil liplut, turdishinatima ludish.
Yeah, AI definitely speaks it better than me. So we begin with the most fundamental question. How was the world created? As we touched on this in previous videos, I'll just give you a quick recap and use this occasion to tell you more about their symbolic meaning. According to the Enuma Elish tablets, life emerged after an intense clash between the elder gods and the younger generation. In the beginning, there was only undifferentiated water swirling in chaos. These waters separated into two distinct principles. The male principle, Apsu, which was the fresh water being crucial for life and fertility, often associated with the nurturing aspect of creation, and the second principle, Tiamat, as the female part. This is maybe about to trigger some modern feminists, but I wasn't the one making those myths, so be nice and give me a like if you think that water is a nice element. Anyways, Tiamat was made out of my favorite element, represented by salt water, the vast sea with its chaotic nature, and it was seen as a primordial force of chaos, but also of creative nature. The sea in many ancient cultures represented unpredictable and uncontrollable forces capable of producing destruction and disorder, but Tiamat was an important part of the primordial creative pair with Apsu, from which the gods and by extension the universe itself were born. born. And so, out of this raw potential, the little ones crawled out. These younger gods were so boisterous in their daily interactions that they began to irritate the elders, especially Apsu, driving him to want to kill them. Mother Tiamat warned her son out of empathy, but contrary to her expectations, this one solved the problem by killing the father Apsu. Angry Tiamat, furious, summoned the forces of chaos to destroy the children she earlier had warned from destruction. Long story short, it's like a family argument that went quite too far. Enki and his siblings not only fought against Tiamat, but also her champion Kingu, the forces of chaos, and her other creatures. The battles were fierce. The children tried their hardest to defeat their mother, but they were unsuccessful and grew increasingly desperate. Enki, the god of wisdom, suggested they turn to his son Marduk, a young and powerful god, for help. Marduk agreed to fight Tiamat, but one of the conditions was if he defeated her, he would become the supreme ruler of the gods. Once this was agreed upon, he prepared for battle, arming himself with weapons and magical powers. He rode into battle on a chariot, drawn by 4 divine steeds, and engaged in Tiamat with a fierce cosmic duel. Using his cunning and strength, Marduk managed to defeat Tiamat, slaying her with a powerful arrow that split her body in 2, making one half of her into heaven, appointing their sun, moon, and the stars to execute their prescribed motions, and the other half into the earth. He pierces her eyes to let the Tigris and Euphrates flow forth, and then rising mountains on her body in the east. He organized the cosmos and assigned the gods their various cosmic offices and tasks, and tada! The orderly world as we know it was done. But here you might wonder, what tasks did these fellas get? Well, I can't show you each and every god. The Sumerian lists mention around 3,600 of them, but I meticulously picked the most important ones for you and the top 3, or should I say the flop 3, who got the short end of the stick. As Mesopotamia existed for a very long time, these deities had different names depending on the region and time period, but we'll be sticking with my favorite ones and writing both options down from Akkadian and Sumerian. So, the most famous and important gods, many of whom were part of the Anunnaki, also meaning princely offspring, had the most crucial jobs. In later myths, there were said to be hundreds of Anunnaki, but the main and earliest ones are called the 7 who decree. Whenever you see an A, you'll know which ones are part of the OG squad of Mesopotamian deities. The heavy hitters responsible for cosmic order included Anu, the sky god, his sons Enlil, the god of air, and Enki, the god of water, and Nana, the moon god. These power players controlled weather patterns, ensured the land's fertility, and basically kept the universe running smoothly. Then there were other major deities, the guardians of humanity, like Shamash, the sun god of justice, or Ishtar, the goddess of both love and war. Talk about a multitasker. And Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing. They shielded people from evil, made sure justice was served, and bestowed knowledge upon them. And for the main ones, let's not forget the providers, the essential workers of the Mesopotamian pantheon, like Ninursag, the mother goddess of fertility associated with human creation itself, Dumutzit, the god of shepherds, and Nisaba, the goddess of grain. They made sure the harvests were plentiful and everyone had enough to eat. But as always, not all the gods had such glamorous jobs. Some, well, let's just say really drew the short straw, if you know what I mean. In the quirky side of the divine, we have Kapta. This god was all about bricks. Yeah, bricks. While they're important for building, a whole god dedicated for them, that's Kapta for you. I guess someone had to oversee those cigars. Then we have Lahar, the god of livestock. While important for agriculture, Lahar's main concern was the well-being of sheep and cattle, a shepherd of the gods, if you will. And for the last who really could take the cake, Neti, the sun god storeman. Imagine a god whose only job was opening and closing doors. That was Neti, the gatekeeper of the underworld. His daily task was to let the sun god Shamash in and out of the underworld. Don't ever again complain about your boring 9-to-5 job. Imagine Neti has to do this for eternity. So, as we, seeking artificial intelligence and machinery to help us, the gods also weren't quite happy to have so much work to do. And this led to us little human beings being needed. So, How were we created? All in all, there are two different notions about human origin that seem to have been current in ancient Mesopotamia. The first notion is briefly mentioned in Sumerian texts, indicating that the first human beings grew out of earth in the manner of grass and herbs. The second one is the one we have looked into, presenting the view that humankind was created from select ingredients by Enki or Marduk, or by Enki and some other god. They weren't quite united on who did what back in the days. But across those various Mesopotamian myths, we are created from a mixture of clay and blood of a god. This symbolizes both the earthly and divine component of human beings. However, the divine aspect is not that of a living god, rather the one of a slain and powerless divinity. The primary reason for creating us was to relieve the gods from their labor and to serve them by maintaining temples, performing rituals, and providing offerings. In some accounts, the breath of life is given by the gods to animate the clay figures, indicating a divine spark or soul within humans. We basically are god helpers according to Mesopotamian religion. Yes, you have heard me right, helpers. Despite the gods' apparent victory, there was no guarantee that the forces of chaos might not recover their strength and overturn the orderly creation of the gods. Gods and humans alike were involved in the perpetual struggle to restrain the powers of chaos, and they each had their own roles to play in this dramatic battle. The responsibility of the dwellers of Mesopotamian cities was to provide the gods with everything they needed to run the world. The forces of chaos are depicted as primordial and ever-present, never entirely defeated, even when order is established by the gods. This reflects the belief that chaos, symbolized by figures like Tiamat, always poses a potential threat to the stability and order of the cosmos. The gods' creation of an orderly world is seen as a continuous effort rather than a permanent victory, acknowledging that chaos could regain strength and disrupt the balance at any time. No one is ever safe, so you better do your work. And what is that work to be done? With a large pantheon of gods and a complex mythology that goes along with it, religion was incredibly essential to people in ancient Mesopotamia. It fundamentally shaped every aspect of their daily life. Two ideas loomed large over all others: sins and good deeds. These two concepts governed people's behaviors and affected both legal system and societal norms. Understanding these concepts provides us with a good insight into how Mesopotamians viewed their relationship with the divine and their place in the world. Sins and good deeds allowed to maintain order and please the gods. It is important to note that the same action could be categorized as a sin or not, depending on whether a king or a normal civilian committed it. Overall, the idea is very similar to what I understood from the concept of Dharma in Hinduism. If you're not familiar with it, subscribe and inshallah we will also get into this concept. But in relation to Mesopotamians, one was believed to have a specific duty in his life. A farmer has to be a good farmer with the rights of a farmer. A king has to be a good king with the rights of a king. So not doing what one is meant to do is generally seen as a sin. But let's look deeper into some more examples of sins. Even though it varied, the fundamental essence of the gravest sin was disobedience towards the gods. This included infringements such as resisting their will, scorning their commands, and neglecting them and rebelling against their authority. The gods were believed to demand respect and devotion, and failing to provide these could result in divine displeasure, manifesting as natural disasters, disease, or personal misfortune. So you would better not ignore one of those sacrifices or festivals if you wanted to keep a relaxed lifestyle. Breaking oaths and contracts were also regarded as one of the biggest sins, since they are often sworn in the name of God. Not fulfilling a made promise was believed to anger the gods who upheld justice and order. Speaking of justice, actions disrupting social harmony, such as theft, murder, and dishonesty, were considered sinful. The same thing can be said for certain sexual behaviors. Based on the observation that Mesopotamian divine texts often have an explicit sexual touch to them, it can be surprising to hear that they had rulings similar to today, but the nature of their scriptures is rather connected to symbolism of fertility and artistic expression. Prostitution did exist, but its social acceptance and regulations varied amongst different cities societies and time periods. But like many other societies, even though polygamy was allowed, intimate relationships were ruled by a marital contract before the gods, and behaviors of adultery or incest were frowned upon, even leading to severe legal consequences from the Hammurabi Code. Let me give you some more precise passages of this Hammurabi Code. The Law 130. If the wife of a man has been caught lying with another male, they shall bind them and throw them into the water. If the husband of the woman would save his wife, then the king could save his servant. Law 14. If a man has committed a robbery and is caught, that man shall be put to death. Law 195. If a son has struck his father, his hands shall be cut off. Law 196. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. Neglecting family duties is also a sin, such as not providing for one's family, failing to protect them, or disrespecting elders could be seen as sinful. In fact, the family was the central unity of Mesopotamian societies, which meant fulfilling familial responsibilities was crucial. In Mesopotamian religion, sin is distinguished between material and formal categories. Formal sin is considered both inherently wrong and recognized as such by the sinner, thus involving in personal guilt. On the other hand, material sin involves actions that are inherently wrong according to divine law and human moral principles, but are committed unknowingly by the sinner, thereby absolving them from personal culpability. This distinction underscores the complex moral framework of Mesopotamian belief, where personal awareness of wrongdoing determines the level of moral accountability. For example, if one was trespassing a sacred site without knowing, usually they wouldn't get sanctioned. But if one was feeling guilty and wanted to repent, he would try to appease the gods by doing a ritual washing to cleanse oneself from the sins, making offerings, prayers where he would be humbling himself, raising hands, prosterning, or touching the statue. And I also found some penitential psalms. Let me read you a few examples. From a Sumerian penitential psalm. My God, the day shines bright over the land. For me the day is black. The bright day, the good day has... like the... I alone am plunged into darkness. O my God, forgive my sins. From a Babylonian prayer to Ishtar. I, your servant, full of sighs, call upon you. The fervent prayer of the one who has sinned, do you accept? If you look upon a man, that man lives. O Almighty Lady of mankind, merciful one, to whom it is good to turn, who accepts supplication. From the Epic of Gilgamesh. O Shamash, I have followed the road, the path you commanded, but I am tormented with grief, my heart is sick. Forgive my sins, grant me the boon I seek. It's very similar to modern prayers. In ancient Mesopotamian religion, the ordinary person often perceived the great gods like Anu, Enlil, or Inanna as remote and unapproachable. Consequently, personal gods or goddesses became central in religious devotion, serving as intermediaries believed to intercede on behalf of the worshippers with the more powerful deities. For kings and priests, however, the situation differed significantly. They were taught to have a more direct contact to the higher deities, which could be particularly frustrating for an incantation priest, a religious professional expected to understand and mitigate suffering through rituals. Yet even these intermediaries faced limitations in directly reversing misfortune, which could be perplexing for both them and the people they served. In Mesopotamian belief, the hardships experienced by humanity were not directly attributed to the gods' injustice, but rather to the individual sins for each person. This perspective is reflected in texts such as the tale of the Great Flood of Gilgamesh, where it is mentioned that the gods gave twisted words to the human race. They endowed them in perpetuity with lies and falsehood. This phrase suggests that humans were endowed with imperfections by the gods, rather than being inherently evil. It implies that human nature, with its limitations and susceptibility to wrongdoing, was shaped by divine creation. As we saw earlier, the gods needed people to feed them and care for them, through sacrifices and cult practices. The lot in life for the average person was to be quiet, to keep the land in good order and attend to the needs of the gods. However, the frequent appeal for divine help indicate that the gods' intentions were often unclear or not fully understood. In some eras, even the kings declared themselves divine. This self-deification may have been viewed in attempts to enlarge their area of influence and power. We have the example of Naram Sin of Akkad. The latter is considered considered the first Mesopotamian ruler who declared himself divine. Naram-Sin reigned sometime during the 23rd century BCE, but the exact dates and duration of his reign are still subject to research. The king proliferated the cult of Ishtar, the goddess of war and love. Naram-Sin seems to have emphasized Ishtar in her warlike aspect and begun to refer to himself as the husband warrior of Ishtar.